Cubista. What is the GCLC to you?
Well, it's a great question, Ross, and I'm so glad you asked. The GCLC, to me, really represents an opportunity for change leaders to come together around the world and prototype systemic solutions at scale in a way that can be replicated and modeled, and we can learn from the best practices of what is already happening around the world in different change maker contexts, and then allow us to also come together in core teams around prototyping systemic innovation and leadership capacity opportunities that allow us to create innovations that have really not existed before. Because a lot of people fundamentally, even in the best cases, the best prototypes in the world, are often happening in their own bubbles. And so the GCLC provides the opportunity for people to come together and hone in on not only what's working best, but how we actually translate these systemic innovations into world-changing collaborative initiatives.
So if we look at what's happening outside of this room, which is a team of change leaders who've come together primarily from across Austria, but including some other folk, with the intentional purpose of building a method, a way of change leaders across Vienna and across Austria coming together through a process of co-constructing the massive transformation in education. And so what do you think the GCLC's, we talk about the GCLC and we're still trying to figure out what it quite means, but what in your mind could it mean in the context of helping this team of change leaders in Austria make a fundamental transformation of the education system?
Well, I think one thing that the GCLC can do is bring in best practices and expertise into local contexts, for example, in Vienna or in Austria as a whole, in order to support on-the-ground projects and prototypes, and do that in a way that then links them to global support. And so I think there can be a feedback loop that allows for people to come in to given localities, and then also have those localities scale, and that they can be learning labs for people how to do that in other places.
And this is essentially what your contribution has been over the past few days. Your central contribution has been around helping this group of change leaders in Austria become more sophisticated in their systemic thinking and systemic behavior, ways of being.
Well, and one of the things that I'm curious about in relationship to where the GCLC can best serve communities of practice around the world is partly in regard to the inception or the inspiration of it in the first place. And so I'm just wondering for you, what for you has been the inspiration that created this evolving vision?
Oh, that's that's a big question. We'll be here for way too long, so I'll give a pithy version of that. So I've been for many years acutely aware of the failure of education systems, but but also concerned particularly about what we need education systems to do. They're just not doing and not even trying to do what I think education systems should be doing, and I think we need to also fundamentally sort of think differently about education systems, to think of them as ecosystems in which teachers and parents and young people and employers and people are talking and doing things together to centrally nurture human beings who make a positive contribution to the world and are doing well for themselves and for others. And that has come through a very long and rapidly lengthening process of looking very closely at schools around the world, visiting schools around the world, talking with kids and with parents and teachers and policymakers and employers, having that privilege, and and it is a real privilege. It just strikes me that we have it within ourselves, within this world of education, thousands of people who want to create a new kind of education system, a new kind of service and experience for young people. But we're not particularly being successful at scaling or multiplying, replicating our work. And it seems to me that in order to accelerate the change, which I think is urgently needed now, I think we need to get better organised, and I think we need to say, let's come together as people who want to lead change in our community, and let's think about let's talk about what we want to achieve, and then let's talk about what therefore needs to change in a very systemic way, and then let's go on that journey together of collectively changing education systems from a very grassroots, for a hyper-local level, nested upwards. And I suspect I haven't answered your question at all.
Well, I think the thing though is that what I'm excited about within the inception of the invitation really, is that if we're going to create change leader ecosystems from within education, then we're talking about educational innovation from the inside out. That starts with building change leader capacity to be able to participate in a collaborative and ecosystemic way, to be able to work in communities with families, with students, and with teachers, to be able to collectively create something from within that allows the system to shift. And it can be supported, as we said before, from both global and local perspectives and practices that allow that to take shape. And I think what we're doing here is prototyping initial steps for people to consider how that might happen in Austria. And we could do that both in Austria and many other places around the world, bringing people together for the shared.
That's absolutely the intention. So we've got communities being now forming themselves in Washington DC, and across Spain. We have a team that's now sort of beginning to focus, has done some very interesting work. We've got a brilliant team of people starting to do this in many countries across Europe and around the world. And it seems to me that what we're now trying to do is to essentially create a way of this taking hold, this idea of teams coming together in a sort of community spirit way, but in a very sort of sophisticated, informed, reflective way. And of course, central to that is the idea that we need to stand forwards as change leaders and sort of become the change we want to be, because we are in the system. We need to become the systems we want to realise, and that's not my term, of course, but it's quite a nice term, isn't it? I like that.
Well, and I think too, when we start thinking about open source systems change that allows us to be the system we want to see in the world, it links us to an opportunity within the GCLC to link people to the opportunities, resources, and connections that advance the great work that's happening and the great work that can be done collectively together through the platform.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much.